Across this thirsty landscape, an ancient journey is beginning, guided by memory and the distant promise of water. The zebras sense a change before the landscape reveals it, following paths shaped by generations of seasonal movement. For the impala, every patch of fresh growth is opportunity, but open ground demands constant awareness. Even before the flood arrives in force, moisture awakens vegetation along the delta's hidden pathways. From above the woodland, the giraffe watches a landscape quietly preparing for one of nature's great transformations. Speed is an advantage on open ground, yet today these antelopes are moving toward water rather than away from danger. Where moisture reaches first, new grass appears, drawing grazers toward the advancing edge of the seasonal flood. The sable moves cautiously between woodland and floodplain, using both habitats as the delta begins to change. Cloud and water reshape the mood of the plains, and the roan are among the first to explore the returning moisture. Even a shallow pool can become precious here, offering food, moisture, and relief as the dry season tightens its grip. Above the channel, vervet monkeys search the canopy while keeping a careful watch on the changing ground below. Baboons turn curiosity into survival, examining almost every corner of the woodland for food revealed by changing conditions. Small hunters thrive in the spaces larger animals overlook, reading every sound and movement beneath the grass. For the dwarf mongoose, survival is shared, with many watchful eyes protecting a tightly connected family. Banded mongooses search together, transforming the forest floor into a constantly changing map of scents and possibilities. Small and solitary, the steenbok survives by noticing danger early and disappearing before attention finds it. The first returning moisture creates tender growth beneath the woodland, drawing secretive browsers from their sheltered paths. Along the riverine edge, the bushbuck finds a boundary between dry woodland and a world steadily filling with water. For waterbuck, the returning channels provide both nourishment and familiar refuge as the flood spreads across the plain. The boundary has finally begun to move, and the dry grassland is becoming a wetland 1 quiet meter at a time. Red lechwe are built for this transformation, moving confidently through water that changes the rules for almost every neighbor. Among dense reeds, the secretive Sitatunga moves where softer ground and deeper water offer protection few antelope can use.
As channels deepen, the hippo returns to a world shaped by water, resting through the day beneath its cooling surface.
The crocodile wastes no energy, waiting beside a channel where the flood steadily delivers movement, shade and cooler water.
Below the surface, flowing water reconnects hidden pathways, allowing fish to explore habitats that were dry only weeks before. Flooded grass becomes an underwater nursery, sheltering small fish inside a temporary forest of stems and leaves.
In deeper water, catfish navigate with remarkable senses, finding opportunity even where sunlight barely reaches the channel floor.
Some of the delta's oldest survival strategies belong below the surface, where changing water levels reward extraordinary adaptability. With the flood comes a floating garden, and tiny waterfowl quickly occupy the sheltered spaces between its leaves. Long toes turn fragile leaves into pathways, allowing the jacana to forage across a surface few other birds can walk. The larger African jacana patrols this shifting mosaic, where every floating leaf may conceal another small meal. At the reed edge, the black crake lives between concealment and open water, appearing only briefly before slipping away again. Strong feet allow the swamp hen to turn dense wetland vegetation into both feeding ground and elevated pathway. Open water links the delta's habitats together, creating new resting places for birds as the flood continues outward. Where water remains shallow, grazing birds find tender vegetation newly released from months of dryness. Larger water birds arrive as fish spread through the new channels, turning fresh floodwater into a moving source of abundance. Patience and precision allow the pelican to work these shallows, where every current can concentrate small fish. The Goliath heron hunts by stillness, turning patience into an advantage along the newly flooded margins. Every measured step tests the water ahead, where movement beneath the surface may reveal an unexpected feeding opportunity. Camouflage transforms the purple heron into part of the reed bed, hidden in plain sight beside busy water.
Small herons prosper along the flood's delicate edges, where insects, fish, and floating plants gather in extraordinary numbers.
A simple step can expose hidden prey, and the little egret turns movement itself into a precise feeding strategy.
As the flood expands, isolated pools become connected, and birds can travel between feeding grounds with effortless efficiency.
Dark plumage blends with reflected vegetation, helping the slatty egret work quietly along some of the delta's richest shallows. Where large grazers disturb the floodplain, smaller birds find opportunity in the insects released from the grass.
Sensitive feeding turns cloudy shallows into readable terrain, allowing the stork to search without relying on sight alone.
Tall and unmistakable, the saddle-billed stork patrols channels where floodwater gathers fish into temporary feeding corridors. A specialized bill gives the open bill access to food hidden inside shells, proof that survival here rewards precise adaptation. Across these productive shallows, different feeding tools allow many species to share the same temporary abundance. Freshly flooded soil releases hidden life, turning yesterday's dry ground into today's feeding ground.
Color flashes briefly across the wetland, but the ibis remains focused on the rich mud beneath its feet.
The returning flood creates the open, shallow wetlands these remarkable cranes depend upon for feeding and breeding. Small islands remain above the rising water, creating valuable stepping stones between wetland and woodland. On higher ground, the soundscape changes, and terrestrial birds find refuge from the water spreading around them. Woodland pockets remain essential during the flood, protecting food sources that water alone cannot provide. Even within sight of the flood, life in the trees follows a different rhythm, built around insects, fruit, and shelter. The canopy carries its own abundance, and every fallen seed links the animals above with the forest floor below. Calls travel farther than bodies through thick woodland, quietly connecting animals across vegetation that hides almost everything. From a high perch, the roller watches the wet grass below, waiting for movement to reveal its next opportunity.
The flood produces insects in astonishing numbers, supporting aerial hunters that turn the sky above the reeds into feeding territory.
Every curve of the river offers a different resource, from open air above the water to soft banks beside it. Bright plumage marks another specialist of the river corridor, thriving where open banks meet insect-rich water.
Small enough to vanish among reeds, the malachite kingfisher watches the surface with extraordinary concentration.
Above deeper channels, hovering provides a different view, allowing the pied kingfisher to search clear water from the air.
Larger channels support larger hunters, each positioned where current and visibility offer the greatest advantage.
Few sounds define these waterways more completely, announcing a predator whose life is inseparable from open water. Low flight allows the marsh harrier to read the reed beds from above, following every subtle movement beneath. High above the delta, warm air provides effortless lift and a panoramic view of the flood's expanding reach. Dry islands become elevated watch points, surrounded by water yet still connected to the hunting grounds of the plains. Opportunistic and adaptable, the tawny eagle moves easily between woodland, grassland, and wetland as conditions change. Specialized hunters search from patient perches, waiting for the smallest movement to break the pattern below. On open ground, long legs turn distance into an advantage, allowing the secretary bird to search efficiently across the island. The largest birds of the open plains rely on space, visibility, and patient movement through grass kept dry above the flood. Where camouflage is strongest, stillness can make an animal disappear even when it stands almost completely exposed. As evening approaches, Even birds of drier country depend on the flood's reliable water before darkness settles. Above the delta, soaring scavengers conserve energy by reading invisible currents rising from the warming land. As the heat fades, the great soaring birds settle, leaving the waterways to a different community of hunters. The transition from day to night happens gradually, but every change in light reshuffles opportunity across the delta. One final call marks the end of daylight, while the flood continues moving through darkness without pause. Twilight gives the waterways a quieter character, and the otter explores channels now hidden beneath deepening shadow.
Along shallow margins, touch can be as useful as sight, especially when fading light hides detail beneath the water.
After sunset, secretive mammals inherit the pathways, guided by scent through a landscape transformed by water. Built for balance and stealth, the genet moves between ground and canopy, as though both belong to the same hidden road. Night reveals animals almost invisible by day, and the galago travels through the canopy with quiet precision. Armored with modified hairs, the porcupine searches peacefully through the woodland, while most daytime grazers rest.
At this scale, the forest floor becomes an entire landscape, filled with scents, insects, and shelter between fallen leaves.
Powerful claws give the aardvark access to food sealed beneath the ground, making darkness a productive time to forage. Protected by overlapping scales, the pangolin follows scent rather than speed through the quiet grassland. Curiosity and persistence allow the honey badger to exploit opportunities scattered across both dry ground and wetland margins. Long legs lift the serval above wet grass, while exceptional hearing reveals movement hidden beyond the reach of moonlight. On higher ground, another elusive cat moves through shadow, using cover rather than confrontation to remain unseen. The jackal patrols the changing shoreline, where each night redraws the boundary between water and land. Sharp hearing and adaptability allow jackals to navigate a landscape where conditions can change from one week to the next. For the bat-eared fox, the smallest sounds reveal a feast beneath the grass, proving survival does not always depend on size.
Moisture awakens another hidden population, releasing winged termites that briefly transform the night into a banquet.
Almost invisible at rest, the nightjar becomes an agile aerial hunter when insects rise above the floodplain. Night belongs to wings as much as paws, and insect hunters trace invisible paths above the reeds. From a silent perch, the eagle owl surveys a world defined less by color than by movement and sound.
Even the smallest owls command their own hunting space, listening for movement hidden beneath leaves and grass.
Blending perfectly with the tree, the Scops owl survives by remaining unnoticed until the moment movement matters. The flood has created thousands of tiny stages, and each calling frog adds its voice to the wetland night.
Different calls fill different frequencies, allowing many frog species to communicate within the same crowded wetland.
Some frogs move with surprising patience, crossing newly wet ground toward pools that may exist for only part of the year. Temporary water changes everything for amphibians, opening brief opportunities that must be used while conditions remain favorable.
Above the pool, tree frogs use vegetation as part of their reproductive world, linking branches directly to water below.
Before sunrise, the soaked ground still carries the night's moisture, giving amphibians time to move between sheltered pools.
Reptiles begin to stir as temperatures rise, using calm backwaters as protected routes through the flooded landscape. A fallen tree becomes a bridge between water and warmth, offering reptiles a place to absorb the returning morning sun. Not every survivor follows the water. Some remain on higher islands where dry ground persists inside the expanding wetland. Equally capable on land and in water, the monitor moves easily across the delta's shifting boundary. Warmth returns quickly after sunrise, and the python conserves energy by allowing the landscape itself to provide heat. Stillness is the puff adder's greatest disguise. allowing pattern and patience to merge almost perfectly with the ground. Above the wet ground, branches form another highway, used by reptiles adapted to life among leaves and open air.
Shape can be as effective as color. The twig snake survives by becoming almost indistinguishable from the vegetation itself.
Movement is deliberate here, each careful step keeping the chameleon balanced while its eyes search the world independently. Tiny aerial hunters flourish beside the flood, where warm air and abundant insects turn every reed into a lookout. At dawn, even the smallest creatures carry the flood's signature, in beads of water gathered across wings and leaves. The shallowest pools contain entire communities, each adapted to the narrow world where water meets air. Surface tension becomes solid ground for creatures light enough to exploit a boundary invisible to larger animals. As the sun strengthens, pollinators begin linking the flooded margins with the flowering plants of higher ground. The flood's influence extends beyond water, supporting flowering plants and the insects that connect them across the delta.
At miniature scale, survival depends on thousands of repeated journeys between flowers and shelter.
Nothing is wasted for long in a healthy ecosystem, and tiny recyclers return valuable nutrients to the soil. Beneath the feet of giants, countless small workers maintain the processes that keep the floodplain productive. For buffalo, numbers provide security as the herd enters a landscape where water creates both rich grazing and new uncertainty. Where buffalo move heavily, red lechwe seem almost weightless, built to turn flooded ground into an advantage. The flood challenges even powerful predators, forcing lions to study unfamiliar routes before committing energy to movement. Patience becomes essential when familiar paths disappear beneath water, and the pride must adapt its movements to the new terrain. For the youngest lions, the changing delta is also a classroom, filled with movement, scent, and experiences that shape future survival. Rest conserves precious energy during the heat of day, while the surrounding water quietly redraws the pride's territory. Unlike lions, the leopard can turn trees into pathways, using height and cover to navigate a fragmented, flooded landscape. Every sound carries information, and the leopard waits until the landscape reveals where it can move unseen. Open islands still favor speed, but rising water steadily reduces the wide spaces a cheetah normally depends upon. For young cheetahs, staying close provides reassurance, while the flooded landscape forces their family to reconsider familiar routes. Wild dogs are tireless travelers, yet floodwater demands a different kind of decision: where to cross and when.
The strength of the pack lies in coordination, allowing many individuals to respond together when the landscape changes.
Adaptable and observant, the spotted hyena follows the same natural corridors used by many animals crossing between islands.
Deep channels offer hippos refuge from daytime heat, and young calves remain close within the protection of the group.
Beneath the hippos, fish occupy a quieter world where roots, current, and light divide the channel into countless small habitats.
Root systems create shelter within flowing water, giving smaller fish places to rest, feed, and avoid stronger currents.
Along the shoreline, the hammerkop searches methodically, moving between water and trees as the wetland expands.
As daylight strengthens, some night hunters withdraw to shade, ending their active hours just as other birds begin. After swimming beneath the surface, the darter returns to open air, spreading wet feathers in the warming sun.
Every branch above the channel becomes useful in a landscape where water now occupies so much of the ground.
Open lagoons create uninterrupted feeding space, and turns travel quickly between patches of activity visible from above.
At the thinnest edge of the flood, long legs and light bodies open access to food buried in soft mud. Small shorebirds read the mud centimeter by centimeter, exploiting fresh ground exposed between advancing threads of water. Widespread toes distribute weight across soft ground, another elegant solution to life on a floodplain that never stays still. Even footprints become habitat here, trapping small pockets of water and creating opportunities for the wetland's smallest hunters.
Above the water, grassland songbirds continue their lives on the few stems that remain clear of the rising flood.
The flood does not erase the grassland. It rearranges it, leaving elevated patches where familiar species continue to feed. Dry islands preserve woodland resources, creating pockets of continuity inside a landscape otherwise transformed by water. Some animals survive through partnerships, and the oxpecker finds feeding opportunities directly upon the great mammals of the floodplain. From one host to another, the smallest travelers move across the floodplain without ever needing to cross the water alone. For a young elephant, each crossing becomes experience, learned safely beside adults that remember the delta's seasonal routes. Where dust ruled only weeks ago, fresh grass now spreads beneath their feet, completing one of the delta's most dramatic transformations. Running water concentrates life without making every species identical. Each animal still chooses the habitat that suits it best. From above, every channel becomes part of a larger pattern, carrying life outward across a wilderness built by moving water. The flood has not simply filled the Okavango with water, it has renewed a living network where countless journeys begin again.